Tonight, the fight for voting rights has been pretty discouraging lately, but there's a new effort in Michigan that could be a model for action. I'll speak to Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. And it's a huge race in the Texas primaries. Can a progressive challenger unseat a 9-term incumbent? Texas congressional candidate Jessica Cisneros joins me live. Plus, Republicans continue to use the power of governments to dictate how schools teach race and history. But one Florida state lawmaker has had enough. My conversation with State Representative Ramon Alexander. Good evening, I'm Mehdi Hasan. In state after state, Republicans continue to launch their attacks on voting rights, passing bill after bill, and in some states, Democratic governors are the last line of defense. Look at crucial swing state Michigan, where Republicans responded to Donald Trump's narrow loss by introducing at least 39 bills, 39, to restrict voting rights last year. But GOP lawmakers in Michigan were most interested in 3 particular proposals to beef up voter ID requirements, limit mailing of absentee ballots, and ban election officers from accepting outside grants to cover operating costs. Michigan's Democratic governor, though, Gretchen Whitmer, came out hard against those measures. In an open letter, Whitmer told state senators, quote, "These bills would disproportionately harm communities of color." She went on to veto all 3 bills last October at an NAACP dinner, and she vowed again to veto any Republican restrictions on voting rights.
It is sobering to know that the only thing that is keeping Michigan from looking like Texas when it comes to women's rights and voting rights is the threat of my veto. The intent, as we have seen across the country, is to suppress our votes and perpetuate the big lie. And as long as I'm governor, they will meet my veto when they get it passed. I will stand tall to protect civil rights.
A good outcome. So, end of story, right? Of course not. Republicans don't give up that easily. Instead, they're exploiting a loophole in the state's constitution that could enable them to pass voting restrictions and get around the governor's veto. They've put all their favorite anti-voting proposals into a single citizen ballot initiative. They're calling it the Secure Michigan Vote Petition, and it needs about 340,000 signatures to go on the ballot. But, thanks to a quirk in the Michigan Constitution, a petition doesn't need to go to a statewide ballot. Once it has the signatures, the Republican-dominated legislature can vote on the petition and pass it with a simple majority, and it can't be stopped by the governor. That's pretty unusual. Nearly half the states in the union have some form of petition or ballot initiative process, and in only 7 states, including Michigan, can the state legislature intervene before a petition gets to a ballot. But using those petitions to get around a governor's veto, that's unique to Michigan. Michigan's legislature has passed such voter initiatives just 9 times since the law was adopted 59 years ago. But that was before the chair of the Michigan GOP suggested using the law to push the party's agenda on voting rights and sidestep a veto.
That plan includes taking that legislation and getting the signatures necessary for a legislative initiative so it can become law without Gretchen Whitmer's signature.
He made that suggestion last March at a party function where he also used some pretty vile imagery to describe Michigan's governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General, all of whom are Democrats and women.
Our job now is to soften up those 3 witches and make sure that when we have good candidates to run against them, that they are ready for the burning at the stake.
Soften up 3 witches. All 3 of them, I should add, have faced death threats, and Whitmer was the alleged target of a kidnapping plot in 2020. But back to the petition. You want to talk about a nuclear option? Here it is, thanks to the GOP, the party that praises filibusters and gridlock in a Democratic majority Senate in D.C. suddenly is fine with the tyranny of the majority when it's theirs at the state level. And lest you think this ploy won't work, it already has. Last July, Michigan Republicans took away the governor's long-standing emergency powers to mandate COVID lockdowns after using a petition to get the issue past her veto. And it's easy to get the signatures you need on a petition like that, especially in Michigan, where you can lie to potential signers. No, really. lying is legal. And according to critics of the Secure Michigan Vote petition, that's exactly what's happening now. Those critics have produced a video of one canvasser for the GOP petition telling a voter that it would require proof of a valid signature to vote. That's all. But it actually would mandate a state ID to vote. That's quite a difference. They didn't share it. A spokesman for the petition organizers says they can't police every action by their thousands of statewide canvassers. How convenient. So, that's it. End of story for voting rights in Michigan, right? Another victory for anti-democracy Republicans. Nothing their opponents can do. No, not so fast. On Monday, a new group in Michigan launched its own petition drive, the Promote the Vote 2022 ballot initiative. If it gets enough signatures and is approved by voters, the proposal would block most of the Republican voting restrictions. It would also guarantee public funding for drop boxes and ballot postage. A lot depends on the outcome here. If Promote the Vote succeeds, and remember, it has to succeed at the ballot box in November, organizers will have beaten Republicans at their own game and given Democrats nationwide a possible model to fight voting restrictions from a grassroots perspective. But if Republicans succeed, they lock in control of the Wolverine state for years to come. Voters be damned. Michigan won't be a swing state anymore. Joining me now is Jeff Timmer, former executive director of the Michigan GOP and a senior advisor now to the anti-Trump Lincoln Project, and Nancy Wang, executive director of the Michigan group Voters Not Politicians, who also helped lead the successful 2018 ballot fight for fair redistricting in Michigan. Thank you both for joining me this evening. Nancy, let me start with you. Describe the process that the Promote the Vote activists are using. How is it different from what Republicans have done? This was used to pass measures in 2018 that increased voting access, wasn't it?
Right. So what we're doing is we are using the initiative process the way it was intended. So Michigan allows citizens to collect signatures and put their question directly to the voters. And what we did in 2018 was we actually passed 2 constitutional amendments to end gerrymandering, like you said, and then also to expand voting rights. And those passed overwhelmingly with Michigan voters, 67% for expanded voting rights and 61% for our proposal to end gerrymandering. And that was a way that citizens could step up and take our political power back from the politicians. And what the politicians now have done is they've now turned and tried, to again kind of sidestep the governor, sidestep the voters, even though they know very, very well what we want, which is expanded voting. And they're trying to do this sort of, fake citizens initiative to directly pass these voter suppression laws through the legislature.
Jeff, you were a senior figure in the pre-Trump Michigan GOP. Today, has the Michigan GOP just given up on winning free and fair elections?
Oh, they have. They realize that math is working against them. They're following the pattern of the life cycle of a star. As they become older, they become whiter and denser and hotter, and soon they'll either implode or explode. And they realize that, and so they're trying to game the system so that they can have an advantage, an unfair advantage, that their numbers alone don't allow them to have.
And Nancy, just in terms of the way the Republicans are doing this, or the people behind the Secure Michigan initiative are doing this, it's legal in Michigan to lie to voters about what's in a petition that they're signing. How is that possible, and how is that changing the dynamics on the ground?
Unfortunately, as a voter, it's unfortunate, but it's true that it is actually legal for them to vote, to lie to voters. And in fact, with this Secure My Vote petition, so Voters Not Politicians, we have volunteers all over, the state, and what we're trying to do is tell voters kind of the truth about what's in this petition and what they're trying to do. And we caught their circulators on the street, deliberately lying to voters and saying, well, this is going to end up on the ballot, which of course it's not. It's just going to go straight to the legislature. And they were saying, as you said at the beginning of this segment, that this was only going to require ID, but it's actually going to make it much, much harder for voters to vote in the state of Michigan. So they're out there on the street actively lying to voters right now.
Jeff, Critics would say, hasn't it always been this way in the Michigan GOP? I mean, after running the party, you served on the state canvassing board, which certifies election results. In fact, you resigned after it was reported that you were a partner in a Republican firm that was lobbying against a ballot initiative, an initiative that you voted against putting on the ballot. Now you're worried about Republicans ruling against voters on that canvassing board in future elections, which, thanks for that. We are glad you're speaking out. But your critics would say, too little, too late. What do you say to them?
Well, the Republicans have always been good at gaming the system and taking these quirks in Michigan's law or constitution and using them to the advantage of the Republican Party at the expense of the majority, oftentimes, of voters in Michigan. And, right now, I'm glad to see that Nancy's group and this Promote the Vote coalition is pushing a counter initiative to preserve democracy, to counter this trick by the Republicans and give them a little of their own medicine here. It's about time. Democracy's on the line, and I'm glad to be speaking out in support of it.
And I'm sure our viewers are glad to hear you speaking out. But just to be clear for them, you said Republicans in Michigan have always gamed the system. Are you including yourself there in that honesty, in that moment of honesty?
Oh, sure. I mean, we use the law and the system to our advantage. That incident that you referenced there on the Board of Canvassers, certainly we used the black letter of the law to our advantage. At that time, a court compelled us to certify the petition that was in question, and I did vote to do that.
Well, let's see if any of your former colleagues are willing to come out and speak out against the gaming of the system. I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. Jeff Timmer and Nancy Wang, thank you for coming on the show tonight. I appreciate it.